VEOD presents Our Experts. In this video, we will spend 6 minutes discussing our interpretation and translation services for the Mandarin, Spanish, and Cantonese languages.
One of the many advantages of virtual delivery is reach, or should I say the ability to scale. You can increase your reach and grow by adding interpretation to your existing meetings, training, or coaching events. VEOD sees high demand in China, Latin America, and Hong Kong. So representing Mandarin and Cantonese today, let me introduce Marshall Hammond.
Hello, nice to be here. 很高兴跟你们在一起.
Marshall, was that Mandarin or Cantonese?
That was actually Mandarin. Cantonese is my third language, along with English, obviously. And we often find Cantonese is requested by our clients who work in Hong Kong.
Interesting. Let me ask you just one more question before I bring in Michael, our Spanish speaker. Can you tell me a little bit more about the differences between Mandarin and Cantonese?
Sure, Tori. The differences between Cantonese and Mandarin are really at the spoken level rather than the written level. The written Chinese language is all the same, whether you're speaking Cantonese or Mandarin or any of the other dialects. But the difference really comes out when it's spoken because the pronunciation is so different. In fact, Chinese speakers call it chicken talking with a duck, or gai tong ngap gong in Cantonese, which really just reflects the complete difference in the pronunciation and, in many cases, the syntax that's used between Mandarin and Cantonese.
Wow, thank you. It's such a help to have an understanding of the differences and how that plays into interpretation. Let me turn to Michael Morano, our Spanish-speaking colleague.
Qué gusto hablar contigo. ¿Cómo estás, Tori?
Bien, Michael, gracias. Unlike Cantonese or Mandarin, I do know one or two words in Spanish, and Michael just basically said it's a pleasure to talk with you, and how am I today? And I said, I'm good, thank you. But that's as close as I get to a second language. Michael, was Spanish your first or second language?
I actually learned Spanish and English simultaneously. I grew up in Mexico, so all of my schooling was in Spanish, but we spoke English at home. Both languages come naturally, but what I find is that I do recall my schooling in Spanish, for example, math, timetables, geography. But growing up in a bilingual home, I found that whenever one of us couldn't think of a specific word in English, we'd say it in Spanish, and the entire conversation shifted to Spanish without anybody really noticing.
Flexible and valuable is what I just heard. Not only do both Marshall and Michael have the language skills, they also have the business acumen and the years of work experience to correctly convey your ideas and concepts. Convey them in terms, not just language, but in terms your audience will be able to respond to.
You know, Tori, one example of that between Mandarin and English is, the business phrase we use, seize an opportunity. In Mandarin, that's expressed as 趁一个机会, which really means to take a seat on an opportunity, if you were to translate that literally back into English, or to swing astride an opportunity as if you were mounting a horse almost. That's an example of how we kind of can bridge between languages and concepts.
Yes, Marshall. Thank you for that nice example of how getting the concepts and metaphors correct is much more important than the literal translation of the words used in the metaphor. Thank you. Michael, do you have an example?
Yes, my entire professional career has been spent in sales and consulting. While living in Mexico, I helped start a consulting firm that helped American companies export goods and services to Mexico. And something we focused on was not only translating our customers' marketing materials, but also adapting them culturally. One example is we had a company that did pipe fittings. The name of the company was NACO. NACO in Spanish, unfortunately, translates, the word that is closest to that translation is the word for nerd in Spanish, so we couldn't roll that out on a national level. We had to adapt the name of the company before we were able to expand our marketing efforts.
Interesting, Michael. Thank you for sharing that example. A huge piece of value right there. You've obviously worked with a lot of different types of companies and a variety of companies. Tell us more about some of the individuals you've worked with.
Yes, that's true. Not only a variety of companies, but a variety of decision makers as well. Most of the work that I've done is required getting executive level buy-in, so I've dealt mainly with chief executive officers, chief operating officers, chief medical directors, and other members of the C-suite.
So, Michael, with your experience in the C-suite and large and small groups, live or virtual, sounds like we've got a great, vast amount of experience to draw upon. Thank you very much for sharing a little bit with our listeners today, Michael. Thank you so much. As we conclude this four-language conversation, remember, you can increase your reach by adding interpretation to your existing meetings or training or even coaching events. VEOD is seeing a significant trend in recorded or asynchronous work in Flash or delivered MP4, because everybody has an iPad these days, it seems, yet live webinars and events with interpretation continue in popularity. Before we say goodbye, I'd like to thank Marshall Hammond.
My pleasure. 是我的荣幸.
And Michael Moreno.
Ha sido un placer, Tori. My pleasure.
Thank you so much.